U.S. President Donald Trump is making a new threat against Canada tonight, taking aim at a new border crossing. The Gordie Howe Bridge will connect Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, and it's set to open this year. But Trump is threatening to block it, claiming the bridge was built with no American materials. The bridge was fully funded by Canada's federal government, but now Trump is demanding the U.S. be, quote, fully compensated.
Here's what Mark Carney had to say about a call he had with the U.S. president.
We discussed the bridge. I explained that Canada, of course, paid for the construction of the bridge, over $4 billion, that the ownership is shared between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada, and that in the construction of the bridge, obviously there's Canadian steel, Canadian workers, but also U.S. steel, U.S. workers that were involved. This is a great example of cooperation between our countries. Look forward to it opening. And what is particularly important, of course, is the commerce and the tourism and the voyages of Canadians and Americans that will go across that bridge.
Finally, Mark Carney broke his silence over Donald Trump's explosive threat. And when he responded, it wasn't just a defense of a bridge. It was a warning about power and leverage and the future of North America's economic alliance. Because this isn't some routine political disagreement. We're talking about a $6 billion trade lifeline, built mostly with Canadian money now being pulled into a high-stakes geopolitical pressure game. And if this crossing is blocked, before it even opens, the shockwaves won't stop at the border. They'll ripple through industries and supply chains and alliances that hold the Western economy together. At the heart of this confrontation is the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a massive next-generation trade corridor connecting Windsor, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan. On the surface, it's infrastructure, but strategically, it's one of the most important economic arteries in the world. Nearly a quarter of all US-Canada trade flows through this region, much of it tied directly to auto manufacturing and advanced industry and energy logistics. Every day, components cross this border multiple times before a single vehicle rolls off an assembly line. What makes this bridge extraordinary isn't just its scale, it's who paid for it. Canada financed the overwhelming majority of the project, including construction and key infrastructure on the US side. Ottawa made that investment for one reason: securing the long-term stability of continental trade. In geopolitical terms, Canada wasn't just building a bridge, it was buying insurance on North America's industrial future. Then came the shockwave. Donald Trump signaled that the United States could block or delay the bridge's opening, floating the idea as leverage in broader negotiations with Canada, from trade disputes to border security demands. He wasn't talking about stopping construction. The structure is nearly complete. The leverage lies elsewhere, in federal permits and customs operations and security certifications that only Washington can authorize. In strategic language, this is choke point control. You don't need to own the asset if you control access to it. Without US federal clearance, traffic doesn't move. Supply chains don't flow. The bridge exists physically, but not economically. That threat instantly transformed a binational infrastructure project into a geopolitical bargaining chip. Canada's reply was immediate but calculated. Instead of escalating politically, Ottawa deployed Mark Carney, a figure known less for speeches and more for crisis management. A former central banker who navigated global financial meltdowns, Carney understands leverage and how to counter it. When he addressed the threat, his response carried layered messaging. First, he underscored the ownership reality. Canada funded the project with billions in public money. Blocking it would mean obstructing infrastructure largely financed by an ally. Second, he reframed the economic consequences. This bridge, he argued, isn't just Canada's asset. American steel built it. US workers constructed it. Michigan's economy depends on it. Any blockade would inflict pain on both sides of the border. But beneath the diplomatic tone was a sharper signal. Weaponizing shared infrastructure risks damaging trust inside North America's alliance framework at a moment when Western supply chains are already under global pressure. What most people don't realize is how fragile modern manufacturing logistics really are. Companies like Ford Motor Company and General Motors and Stellantis operate integrated cross-border production systems. A single vehicle can require parts moving back and forth across the Detroit-Windsor corridor half a dozen times during assembly. Delay that flow even briefly, and assembly lines stall. Costs surge. Deliveries slip. Billions in economic activity can freeze within weeks. This bridge was designed to prevent exactly that kind of bottleneck, adding redundancy and modern border processing to a corridor long dominated by the aging and privately owned Ambassador Bridge. So the threat isn't symbolic. It strikes directly at the operational core of North America's industrial engine. There's also a quieter power shift embedded in this story. For decades, cross-border trade in this region depended heavily on private infrastructure control. The Gordie Howe Bridge changes that equation. It introduces publicly governed capacity into a corridor that was effectively monopolized. That redistribution of logistical power has economic and political implications. Control trade routes, and you influence tariffs and tolls and traffic flows. Influence those flows, and you shape industrial geography itself. In that sense, this bridge isn't just new infrastructure. It's a restructuring of continental commerce authority. If the opening were blocked or significantly delayed, consequences would cascade fast. Auto manufacturing would feel the first shock, but it wouldn't stop there. Logistics firms would reroute shipments at higher cost. Energy and agricultural exports would slow. Insurance and freight pricing would spike. And legal disputes could erupt under continental trade agreements, with Canada potentially seeking damages over obstructed access to infrastructure it financed. Diplomatically, the fallout could be even more serious. Using shared infrastructure as negotiation, leverage risks reframing US-Canada relations from cooperative integration to transactional bargaining, a subtle but profound shift in alliance psychology. Zoom out, and this dispute reflects a broader global pattern. Infrastructure, ports and pipelines and bridges and data cables is increasingly treated as geopolitical leverage. From energy corridors in Europe to shipping lanes in Asia, physical connectivity is now part of strategic competition. The Gordie Howe Bridge standoff shows that even the world's most peaceful border isn't immune to that logic. So this isn't just about whether a bridge opens on schedule. It's about whether allies begin treating shared economic lifelines as pressure tools. Because once infrastructure becomes leverage, trust becomes conditional. And if conditional trust defines the future of North American trade, the real risk isn't a delayed bridge. It's a weakened alliance at the very moment global power competition is intensifying. The concrete may be set, the cables may be locked, but politically, this bridge is still being negotiated. And that's why Mark Carney's response matters far beyond this moment. He wasn't just answering Trump. He was signaling that Canada understands the new rules of power and won't pretend this is just politics as usual. In a world where supply chains are already weaponized, where allies quietly hedge against each other, even a bridge can become a test of sovereignty. What happens next will be watched closely, not just in Ottawa and Washington, but in boardrooms, factories, and foreign capitals. If the bridge opens without obstruction, it reinforces the idea that cooperation still wins. But if it's delayed, politicized, or leveraged, it sets a precedent that no shared infrastructure is truly safe. Because once one ally proves willing to pull that lever, others will take note. And then the question won't be about one bridge between Windsor and Detroit. It'll be about how many other connections, economic, political, strategic, can be quietly held hostage in the future. That's the real warning buried in this moment. And that's why the story isn't over yet.